He was seconds away from signing a contract worth billions, his hand already gripping the pen, when a black janitor leaned in and whispered 4 words that made his blood run cold. "Don't sign it, it's a trap." In that moment, the room didn't just fall silent. Something inside him collapsed. Everyone else saw her as invisible, a uniform, a shadow pushing a cleaning cart. But behind her steady eyes was fear, urgency, and a truth powerful enough to destroy careers, friendships, and an empire built over 15 years. He had a choice: trust the woman society had taught him to overlook, or trust the people who looked powerful, familiar, safe. What he chose next would cost her everything: her job, her dignity, her future. And it would haunt him in ways no contract ever could. Stay with this story, because before it ends, someone will be publicly humiliated, a devastating truth will explode in front of everyone, and one shocking decision will change lives forever. Ethan Cole had signed hundreds of contracts in his life, but none of them felt as heavy as the one lying open in front of him that morning. The glass-walled conference room on the 32nd floor overlooked downtown Chicago. Steel, traffic, ambition stretching in every direction. This merger was supposed to crown everything he had built. After 15 years of sleepless nights, bad loans, and personal sacrifices, Hawthorne Group was finally merging with a global investment firm. If Ethan signed that document, his company would triple in value overnight. Everyone in the room looked ready to celebrate already. Victor Hale sat to Ethan's right, relaxed, confident, his longtime partner's arm draped casually over the back of his chair. 15 years of friendship, 15 years of trust. They'd built the company together from nothing, 2 broke graduates with big ideas and empty pockets. Across the table sat Madeline Cross, representing the investment firm. Perfect posture, perfect smile. Everything about her felt polished, rehearsed. Ethan barely noticed her. He was holding the pen when the door opened. No one looked up at first. A janitorial cart rolled quietly into the room, wheels squeaking faintly against the polished floor. A woman in a gray cleaning uniform pushed it forward, head slightly bowed, movements careful, as if trying to take up as little space as possible. "Sorry," she said softly. "I'll be quick. Just emptying the trash." Her voice carried a calm steadiness that didn't match her position. Ethan glanced at her out of habit. Most executives didn't. To them, janitors were part of the furniture, present, necessary, invisible. She was black, mid-30s, hair pulled back neatly. Her uniform fit loosely, as if it wasn't meant for her frame. Her eyes moved quickly, not nervously, but observantly. She stopped beside Ethan's chair. As she leaned down to replace the trash bag, her shoulder brushed the table. Victor frowned slightly, annoyed by the interruption. That was when she spoke again, this time barely above a whisper. "Please don't sign that." Ethan froze. The pen slipped from his fingers and tapped softly against the table. For half a second, he wondered if he'd imagined it. He turned his head just enough to look at her. She was already straightening up, her face composed, eyes fixed forward as if nothing had happened. Ethan leaned back slightly, his heart suddenly pounding harder than it should have. "What did you say?" he whispered. She didn't answer. She pushed the cart away, calm, measured, heading toward the door like any other cleaner finishing her job. Victor leaned toward Ethan with a half smile. "Everything okay?" Madeline glanced at her watch. "We're all set whenever you are." The room felt smaller, warmer, too quiet. Ethan stared at the contract again. The numbers hadn't changed. The clauses hadn't moved. Nothing looked wrong, and yet something felt deeply off. "Give me 5 minutes," Ethan said suddenly, standing up. Victor blinked. 5 minutes? For what?" "I need to take a call." Madeline's smile tightened. "Mr. Cole, we've been over every detail. This deal is time-sensitive." "I said 5 minutes." Ethan didn't wait for permission. He walked out of the room. The hallway smelled faintly of disinfectant. He spotted the janitor halfway down the corridor, pushing her cart toward the service elevator. "You," he called. She stopped. Slowly, she turned around. Up close, he could see exhaustion beneath her composure. Dark circles under sharp, intelligent eyes. "Yes?" she asked. "Come with me." Her jaw tightened for a brief moment. Then she nodded. They stepped into a small break room, barely large enough for a table and 2 chairs. Ethan closed the door. "Explain yourself," he said, crossing his arms. "And you better have a good reason." She met his gaze without flinching. "My name is Renee Walker," she said, "and if you sign that contract, your company won't survive a year." Ethan laughed once, short and sharp. "You're telling me that as a janitor?" She inhaled slowly. "I'm telling you that as someone who understands financial fraud," she replied, "and as someone who's been listening for weeks." Ethan's smile faded. "Listening to what?" "To Victor Hale," she said, "and Madeline Cross." The room felt colder. "They're hiding debt inside the merger," Renee continued, "transferring liabilities into a shell company you don't control. Once you sign, they'll bleed Hawthorne dry and walk away clean." Ethan stared at her. "That's a serious accusation." "I know. Do you have proof?" "Photos, audio recordings, documents." Silence stretched between them. "You realize," Ethan said slowly, "that if this is a lie, you'll be fired immediately." "I'm aware," Renee said quietly. "Why would you risk that?" She hesitated, just for a moment. "Because I've seen this happen before," she said, "and because people like me don't get second chances." Ethan studied her face. There was fear there, but also something stronger, conviction. "And because," she added, "if I stay quiet and you lose everything, I'll never forgive myself." Ethan exhaled slowly. "Meet me here tonight, 7 o'clock. Bring everything you have." She nodded. "I'll be here." When Ethan returned to the conference room, Victor's eyes narrowed slightly. "Everything good now?" Victor asked. Ethan picked up the contract and closed it. "We'll continue tomorrow." Madeline's chair scraped loudly against the floor. "Tomorrow may be too late." "Then that's a risk I'm willing to take." Ethan walked out, ignoring the tension crackling behind him. That night, long after the office emptied, Renee sat in the break room with a small backpack on her lap. Her hands trembled slightly as she pulled out her phone. She showed Ethan photos taken through cracked doors, bank transfers, email chains, contract pages that didn't match the version on the table that morning. Ethan's stomach dropped with every swipe. This wasn't paranoia. This was theft. And the woman who had saved him from it was someone he'd passed in the hallway every day without really seeing. "Why are you cleaning floors?" he asked quietly. Renee looked away. "Because when you're black, overqualified doesn't protect you," she said. "It just makes people uncomfortable." Ethan didn't know what to say. Outside, Chicago glowed in the dark. Inside, something had already started to break, and neither of them realized yet just how much it was going to cost. And this is where I want to pause and ask you, because what happens next depends on how you see it. If you were Ethan, would you trust a black woman the system has already pushed to the bottom over the friend you've trusted for 15 years? Yes or no? The next morning, Renee Walker woke up before her alarm. Her body was exhausted, but her mind wouldn't slow down. Every warning sign she'd ignored over the past 8 months was suddenly loud and clear. The way conversations stopped when she entered a room. The way executives spoke around her instead of to her. The way security cameras always seemed to linger a little longer on her than on anyone else. She dressed in her gray uniform, tied her hair back, and looked at herself in the mirror. "Keep your head down," she told herself. "That's how you survive." By the time she arrived at the building, the atmosphere felt different, tighter, sharper. Word had spread that the merger hadn't been signed. Ethan Cole walked into the office early, dark circles under his eyes. He'd barely slept. Every document Renee showed him the night before replayed in his mind like a slow-motion crash. The hidden clauses, the shell company, Victor's voice on the audio recording, casual, confident, cruel. And yet, Victor was still Victor, his friend, his brother in everything but blood. At 9 sharp, Victor appeared in Ethan's doorway, smiling like nothing had changed. "You worried me yesterday," Victor said lightly. "Walking out like that." Ethan forced a smile. "Big decisions do that." Victor's eyes flicked past him, just briefly, toward the hallway where Renee pushed her cart by. Something cold passed through Victor's expression. "Who's she?" he asked. Ethan hesitated. "Just staff." Victor nodded slowly. "Be careful who you let whisper in your ear, Ethan. People at the bottom sometimes get desperate." The words sounded casual. The threat underneath them wasn't. That afternoon, Ethan asked Human Resources for Renee's file. The HR manager raised an eyebrow. The janitor? Yes. Minutes later, Ethan sat alone reading a resume that didn't belong to a cleaner. MBA, corporate finance, strategy consulting, top-tier firms. His chest tightened. She wasn't invisible, he realized. She was ignored. During lunch, Ethan found Renee cleaning a glass-walled meeting room. Why didn't you tell me, he asked. She didn't stop working. Because it wouldn't have mattered. That's not true. Renee finally turned to him. Her eyes were steady but tired. Mr. Cole, I've told men like you who I was my entire career. They smiled. They nodded. Then they hired someone who looked more comfortable in leadership. He swallowed. This job pays for my sister's heart medication, she continued. Titles don't. Ethan didn't argue. He couldn't. What neither of them knew was that Victor was already moving. At 5:30, an email went out to the entire company. Mandatory security meeting, auditorium, immediate attendance. Renee felt it before she understood it. The looks, the whispers, the way security guards suddenly stood closer to her as employees filled the room. Ethan sat in the front row, uneasy, his gut screaming that something was wrong. Victor took the stage. His voice was calm, authoritative. Thank you all for coming on such short notice, he began. Unfortunately, we've discovered a serious breach of company security. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Confidential documents were photographed and removed from executive offices. Renee's fingers curled around the edge of her cart. And after reviewing footage and device access, Victor continued, we've identified the responsible party. He turned his head. Renee Walker, from Janitorial Services. The room froze. Every head turned. Renee felt hundreds of eyes on her, some curious, some suspicious, some already convinced. Please come forward, Victor said. Her legs felt heavy, but she walked. She had learned long ago that shrinking only made people crueler. Ms. Walker, Victor said, holding up printed photos, these images were found on your phone, documents that only executives should access. Ethan stood halfway out of his seat. Victor, and cameras captured you entering restricted offices outside your assigned hours. Victor interrupted. That's corporate espionage. Renee's voice shook, but she spoke clearly. Those images were evidence. I was trying to protect yourself? Madeline Cross called out from the crowd. Or sell company secrets. The word sell landed like poison. Renee turned toward Ethan. You know why I did this, she said. You've seen the proof. Ethan's heart pounded. This was the moment. The room waited. Victor looked at him. Quiet, warning, familiar. Ethan sat back down. I'm sorry, he said softly. The evidence is concerning. Renee felt something break inside her. Security stepped forward. Please escort her out. No, she said, holding up a hand. I can walk. She turned back one last time. When the truth comes out, she said, voice steady despite the tears burning her eyes. Remember this moment. You had a choice. The doors closed behind her. Outside, the city felt colder. Renee clutched the cardboard box, holding her few belongings, and took a breath that felt like failure. She wasn't just fired, she was erased. That night, Ethan couldn't escape it. Renee's face, her voice, his silence. At 2:47 a.m., he drove back to the office. He logged in, dug deeper, harder, and there it was, the annex he'd never seen, the shell company registered offshore, Victor's name, Madeline's signature, emails mocking his trust, threats, plans. Ethan sat back, shaking. He hadn't just failed Renee, he'd nearly destroyed everything. At dawn, he drove to the south side. Renee's apartment was small, dim, clean. Jasmine lay on the couch, pale but smiling. My sister talks about you, Jasmine said gently. Says you're one of the good ones. Ethan's chest ached. I wasn't, he said. He offered to help, to pay for surgery, to fix things. Renee listened in silence. Money doesn't fix betrayal, she said, especially when it comes from power that failed you once already. Ethan left knowing one thing. If he didn't act now, the damage wouldn't just be financial, it would be moral. And Renee Walker, black, brilliant, broken by a system that never protected her, would be the cost. The boardroom was full long before the meeting officially began. Executives whispered behind polished folders. Legal advisors sat stiffly along the wall. A few journalists had been invited under the excuse of a corporate update, though no one seemed entirely sure why. The tension in the air felt heavier than the city skyline pressing against the windows. Ethan Cole stood at the head of the table, hands resting flat on the wood. He looked older than he had a week earlier, sleepless, changed. When the doors opened, a murmur rippled through the room. Renee Walker walked in. She wasn't wearing her gray uniform anymore. She wore a simple navy blazer, her hair pulled back neatly, her posture straight. She didn't look angry. She didn't look afraid. She looked calm. That calm, unsettled people. Victor Hale's jaw tightened. Madeline Cross crossed her arms, lips pressed into a thin line. Ethan waited until Renee reached the front. "Thank you all for coming," he said. His voice was steady, but there was no mistaking the weight behind it. "This meeting is not about projections or profits. It's about the truth." Victor laughed lightly. "Ethan, we talked about this. You're overreacting." Ethan didn't look at him. "For 15 years," Ethan continued, "I believed loyalty meant silence. I believed trust meant not asking hard questions. I was wrong." He nodded toward Renee. "Last week, this woman was publicly accused, humiliated, and fired. Not because she was guilty, but because she was inconvenient." A screen behind him flickered on. The first document appeared. 2 contracts side by side. One presented to Ethan, one hidden. Gasps filled the room. Renee stepped forward. Her voice was clear, controlled, but carried a quiet force. "The version Mr. Cole was asked to sign would have transferred majority control of the company to an offshore shell corporation," she said. "A corporation owned by Victor Hale and Madeline Cross." Victor stood abruptly. "This is a setup." Renee didn't flinch. The next slide appeared, bank transfers totaling millions. Then audio. Victor's voice filled the room, unmistakable. "If Ethan signs, we take everything. He's too trusting, always has been." The silence afterward was suffocating. Madeline turned pale. "This is illegal," she snapped. "You can't play recordings like that." A man near the back stood. "Actually," he said calmly, "you can, when they involve threats and financial fraud." He held up a badge. "Federal Financial Crimes Unit." Victor's face collapsed. Renee looked out at the room, not triumphantly, not bitterly, but steadily. "I didn't take photos because I wanted power," she said. "I took them because I recognized fraud, because I've been trained to, and because I knew what would happen if I stayed quiet." She paused. "I stayed quiet for years in other offices. It didn't save me then. It wouldn't have saved anyone here." Ethan swallowed hard. "When I failed to defend her," he said, his voice breaking slightly, "I didn't just fail as a leader. I failed as a human being." Agents stepped forward. Victor's protests echoed uselessly as he was escorted out. Madeline followed, her composure gone, heels clicking too fast against the floor. When the doors closed, no one clapped. They didn't need to. The truth had landed. Later that afternoon, Ethan stood alone in the hallway, staring out at the city. Renee approached quietly. "It's done," she said. "Not all of it," Ethan replied. "I still owe you something." She raised an eyebrow. "An apology?" "Yes, and space, and accountability." He turned to her fully. "I won't ask you to forgive me," he said. "I don't deserve that yet, but I want you to know this. What happened to you will never happen here again. Not under my watch." Renee studied his face. "I don't need promises," she said. "I need consistency. You'll have it." 2 weeks later, Renee sat beside her sister's hospital bed. Jasmine smiled, color finally returning to her face after surgery. "Guess I'll have to stop calling you my janitor sister," she teased weakly. Renee laughed through tears. "Don't you dare!" The surgery had been funded anonymously. Renee didn't ask how. She suspected, but she didn't want that debt. Some things were better left as choices freely given. Back at the company, changes were happening fast. Mandatory bias training, transparent hiring panels, a review of every termination in the past 5 years. Renee watched it all with cautious distance. Then Ethan called her into his office. "I want to offer you a position," he said. She crossed her arms. "I'm listening." "Director of Operations," he said. "Full authority, full transparency." Renee didn't answer right away. "I won't accept this as a reward," she said finally. "I'll accept it if it's responsibility." Ethan nodded. "That's exactly what it is." She took the job, not because she needed validation, but because she knew what happened when people like her weren't in the room. Months passed. The company stabilized. Profits returned. Trust slowly followed. But the real change wasn't in numbers. It was in hallways where people now said her name correctly, in meetings where her voice wasn't questioned before it was heard, in young employees of color who saw her office door open and realized maybe they didn't have to stay invisible forever. One evening, Renee and Ethan stood on the rooftop terrace overlooking Lake Michigan. "Do you think this would have ended differently if I wasn't black?" Renee asked quietly. Ethan didn't hesitate. "Yes," she nodded. "That's what hurts the most." "Shuri," he met her gaze. "And that's why it has to change." Renee breathed in the cool air. "For the first time," she said, "I don't feel like I survived. I feel like I stood." Ethan smiled softly. "That's strength," he said, "not silence." They stood there in quiet understanding. Not a fairy tale, not a perfect ending, but something better, a just one, a human one, and maybe a beginning. Now I want to hear from you. How did this story make you feel? Did it make you angry, hopeful, or reflective? Do you believe Renee made the right choice by speaking up, even when the system was stacked against her? If you enjoyed this story and want to see more like it, comment 111 below, so we know you stayed with us until the end. And tell us, which country are you watching from? If this story moved you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it today.